So the effects of screen culture on thinking, as well as doing good things, and I do want to emphasize, I'm aware it can speed up mental processes and rehearse mental process, sensory motor coordination and the like. It's strongly sensory. It may be related to short attention spans. I don't think it requires a conceptual framework. There's not abstract concepts or metaphors, and it is an emphasis of what I would call process over content. So when you play a computer game to rescue the princess, you don't really care about the princess, do you? You don't care about her. Whereas when you read a book, you care about the princess. And that leads then, is when you play a computer game as well, it's reversible. You can always play it again and play it again and play it again. Whereas life is not reversible. Life is irreversible. So I'm just wondering whether these issues of narrative, of concepts, of metaphor, of irreversibility, are therefore of significance. If something's reversible, it's not very meaningful, because you can just do it again. Whereas you rehearse something means something to you. Money means something to me, because if I have this, then I can do that. You have a little narrative. If you don't have that narrative, then what happens to you even as a person? Are you someone saying yuck and wow? In which case, do you have a robust identity? And I'm just wondering, and this is speculative, whether the popularity of Twitter, say, I am putting on my socks, I'm cleaning my teeth, is this reflecting people with a shaky sense of identity that need reassurance that they're there? So there we are. That's then finally we come to Second Life. I don't know how many people are on Second Life. They won't any more than the philosophers or the neuroscientists are going to declare their hand. I'm sure the avatars in the audience are not going to put their hands up. But as we know, Second Life, well, as I'm sure you know, is what it says. It's a second life where you can have these kind of relationships. But I'm just wondering what that does to your first life identity. And what's quite interesting is autistic people, for example, are very happy on Second Life because you don't have to have empathy in the way you do when you are listening to prosody voice tones and looking at body language and picking up on pheromones in quite the same way. So you can have a false identity, you can have a collective identity. First thought of actually by Chardin, the Jesuit monk 50 years ago, who thought of the noosphere, lots of nodes that actually connected up into a grand intellectual collective. Or perhaps you can have no identity, where you're just sitting there, just passive. So just as we saw in the hedonistic world, the one that we all like in our different ways, so I'm not rubbishing it, what I am concerned about is whether, if it's just that and nothing else, is that the best we can do? Is that what we want to do? Are we living in this cyber world? And finally, I'd like to, am I okay for time? 5 more minutes, Chairman? Yeah, is that okay? I'd like to relate this to something that I think is very important, especially with the current economic climate, and something that interests many people, which is the taking of risks. Because if you have no sense of significance, if everything can be reversed, if nothing has consequences, what will that do to your attitude to taking risks, I wonder, if you are living hours a day without taking consequences? So, if you ask a neuroscientist to talk about risk, they will always talk of extreme neurological examples characterized by, indeed, extreme recklessness. And we know, and we've known this since the middle of the 19th century when someone got a big bar through their brain, someone called Phineas Gage, that this area of the brain, the so-called prefrontal cortex, actually, if it's damaged, changes people in a very subtle way, as it did with this man famously in the 19th century, so that they are more living in the moment, they have disregard for consequences, they are just much more spontaneous and irascible and indeed reckless. Now this is someone, a guy called Michael, I'm going to show a second film now of Michael, who was the equivalent of this man Phineas Gage, but a 20th century version. He was a soldier in Vietnam and he got shrapnel in the frontal part of his brain. And what you're going to see is what this did to his risk-taking. So let's now look at Michael's movie.
X-rays revealed that shrapnel from the grenade had penetrated the front of Michael's brain.
Michael has undergone a rather dramatic transformation. Before his injury, he was a bright and very promising and assertive soldier. And subsequent to his injury, Michael became unemployable, made many mistakes in social behaviors and relations, and has to live a much more limited life now.
Demoted, and eventually discharged from the army, Michael has been unable to hold down a steady job. He's now working under supervision as a hospital janitor.
I'm going to start out by giving you 10 chips. Each chip is worth 5 cents.
Dr. Jordan Grafman is trying to establish why Michael's life has fallen apart. What aspects of his mental abilities have suffered because of the damage to his frontal lobe?
8, 9, 10.
This gambling task is designed to test his ability to weigh up the likely consequences of his actions. The point of the test is to see at what stage in the game he decides to stop.
Do you want to stop or do you want to continue?
Continue.
High cards, Mike wins a chip. 10 or less, and he loses one.
Continue.
The cards are deliberately arranged to give him a good winning streak,
Continue.
followed by a steady run of losses. Normally, people stop while they're ahead.
Continue. You should have kept it. Continue. Continue.
That's it. We're at the end. You gave me back all your chips.
Okay, so you can see, therefore, an example of recklessness, which is easy to evaluate in a gambling task and is associated with an underfunctioning of this frontal part of the brain, the so-called prefrontal cortex. This occurs with damage, as we've just seen. It can also occur in schizophrenia, where there's no physical damage, but where there's an excess of the chemical dopamine, which we know inhibits that front part of the brain. And in schizophrenic people, they often feel that they are very at the mercy of the environment. They're very much in the moment. Colors seem very bright and shiny, and they are very much cowed by and imploding in by the environment. Interesting enough, in obesity, this is a fascinating study that I found quite recently. First of all, obese people are similarly reckless in gambling tasks compared to non-obese counterparts. Strange. And moreover, this is a second paper, there's an inverse association between the body mass index, that's to say how fat you are, and your metabolic activity, how active that front part of the brain is. Just think about that. So in healthy adults, according to this paper, the frontal part of your brain is less active the higher your body mass index. Now, let's put that together. What possibly in common could there be between people with damage, as we've just seen, between obese people, who incidentally also take risks in more reckless, and at the same time, schizophrenia, where the environment is imploding? What could these things have in common?